Okay, my name is Ron Berglass, and I, along with my colleagues, Dr. William Burnett and Dr. Lynn Steinberg, represent the Parental Alienation Legislative Group. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present to you today. We are here to ask you to support our proposal to amend the Business and Professions Code to make it a requirement for all mental health practitioners working with children to be educated in parental alienation and its diagnostic indicators. What is parental alienation? I'm sure you've heard of it, maybe in your own lives or maybe in the lives of those whom you know and love, but didn't know it had a name. According to my colleague, Dr. William Burnett, Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at Vanderbilt University and the author of the highly acclaimed Parental Alienation Science and Law, it is a psychological dynamic in which a child, usually one whose parents are engaged in a high-conflict divorce, allies strongly with one parent, the preferred parent, and rejects a relationship with the other parent, the alienated parent, without a good reason. The long-term mental, emotional, and physical damage done to a child by parental alienation has been proved to cause substance abuse, cutting, diabetes, chronic difficulties with relationships, educational and career challenges, lack of self-esteem, and sometimes suicide. The alienators are the architects of their own exoneration. By coercing their child to reject their other parent, the alienator tells the police, lawyers, therapists, and the court that it is not their responsibility that their child has rejected their other parent. They claim the child decided to hate their parent, not them. That is severe psychological abuse. Dr. Steinberg and I are both alienated parents, but we are not here to lament our losses on your doorstep. We are here representing thousands of California children to help them avoid this awful trauma. And the best first step is to require all members of the California therapeutic community working with children to be educated in parental alienation. The current approaches of family therapy do not address the dynamics at play. Causing parental alienation through alienating behaviors is child abuse. It is family violence. It is domestic violence. It is child coercive control. On September 29, 2020, the legislature passed SB 1141, Rubio, Chapter 248, an act to amend Section 6320 of the Family Code relating to coercive control. Here is an excerpt from that law. By adding coercive control, the bill, for purposes of a family court determining child custody in those proceedings, creates a rebuttable presumption that an award of a child custody to a party who is engaged in coercive control is detrimental to the best interest of the child. The bill goes on to state, as used in this subdivision, A, disturbing the peace of the other party refers to conduct that destroys the mental or emotional calm of the other party. This conduct includes coercive control, which is a pattern of behavior that interferes with a person's free will and personal liberty. An example of coercive control includes unreasonably engaging in isolating the other party from friends, relatives, or other sources of support. Divorcing families in California are required to go to mediation and frequently are ordered into co-parenting therapy. Parental alienation is not a problem that is caused by warring parents. It is caused by the malign intentions of one vengeful parent engaged in a high-conflict divorce who attempts to use their children as weapons against their former spouse, whom they perceive as having done them harm. Therefore, it cannot be cured by co-parenting therapy. I should add that parental alienation is non-gender specific. Fathers as well as mothers engage in child coercive control. You will hear opposition to what we are proposing from those who disavow the existence of parental alienation. They will claim that it is a strategy used by abusive fathers to regain control of their children. Yes, that does happen. You will hear that mothers who accuse their former husbands of domestic violence have their cases thrown out, leaving the children in the hands of their abusers. Yes, that happens too. Child abuse comes in many forms. Parental alienation is one of them. Who is a child when they've been forced to reject their own parent? The parent hasn't been taken away from them, or run away, or died. The child has been psychologically coerced into rejecting their parent and eventually comes to believe it was their decision alone. A child is forced to give up a part of who they are in order to appease and mollify an abusive parent. This is the essence of family violence. Even sexually abused or violently abused children including foster children, want to maintain some kind of relationship with their abuser and the extended family. Being alienated is the only, I repeat, the only situation in which a child completely rejects a parent and that parent's extended family. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and other important people who were part of the child's life are rejected too. The alienated child ceases to be who they were meant to be. I've already spoken of the long-term damage that causes. There are scientifically proven procedures readily available now to all mental health practitioners working with children that they could be using to recognize the diagnostic indicators, such as the 5-factor model created by the aforementioned Dr. Burnett and Dr. Amy Baker, which is a method for diagnosing parental alienation by understanding and identifying the components of this mental condition. Dr. Steinberg will go into further detail about this later in our presentation. Dr. Barry Bricklin created the Bricklin Perceptual Scales, which were developed specifically for use in child custody evaluations and which define and quantify children's attachment to and perceptions of their parents. Estranged children are likely on the Bricklin scales to manifest ambivalence toward both parents. Alienated children, on the other hand, are likely to see the preferred parent as totally good and the rejected parent as totally bad. That, in the vernacular, is called splitting. Imagine, if you will, an alienated child being transported to therapy by the alienating parent who instructs them in what to say. The therapist, perhaps well-schooled in some form of family systems therapy, but not parental alienation, concludes there must be something to the child's rejection of their parent, and so exacerbates the crime against the child by recommending to the court that the child remain with the alienating parent. The judge orders a custody evaluation. The custody evaluator, equally unschooled and uninformed in the parental alienation dynamic, contrasts the calm, collected, manipulative alienator against the targeted parent who is yet to understand why their children have turned against them. They present as confused, full of rage, and terribly hurt. After listening to the child's manufactured and rehearsed complaints about their rejected parent, quite often in language inappropriate for a child, the evaluator also concludes there must be something to what the child says and recommends to the court that the child should remain with the alienating parent. The judge, by virtue of their wide discretion, coupled with their ignorance of parental alienation, concurs, thereby sealing the child into a lifetime of self-denial and dysfunction. Think of the secret the alienated child carries so deeply that they cannot admit it to themselves, that they still love their rejected parent, but cannot give voice to that feeling, cannot allow themselves to believe it. They become adults, now believing that it was entirely their decision to reject their alienated parent and cannot be convinced otherwise. Imagine what might have happened had the therapist been trained to recognize the alienator for who they were, had been able to diagnose and treat the child appropriately, had been able to recommend to the court, based on scientific evidence, that there should be a 90-day change in custody to the targeted parent who has heretofore committed no crimes. My daughter Amy was so traumatized by not being permitted to love her father by her mother while her mother had primary custody that when she told her mother she wanted to kill herself, her mother told her to do it at her father's house, because at least then I could be seen as the bad guy. My daughter Amy, who at the age of 12, secretly asked me to go to court so that I could get custody of her, but then had to watch as her mother called her own brother to testify against her. My daughter Amy was so terribly damaged by her mother's sometimes vicious, violent, coercive control that in spite of coming to live with me, overdosed twice on fentanyl. She is alive, thank God, after over a year in rehab, but still suffers from severe mental and emotional issues made worse by her mother's total abandonment of her since she lost control over her daughter. She has made no attempts to contact Amy, no apologies, nothing. It is always about control and revenge for the alienator, never about love. This is real-life family violence. Ideally, lawyers and judges should be required to be educated in parental alienation too. Ideally, there should be the threat of sanctions against continued alienation. When it has been proven that parental alienation has taken place and the 90-day reverse custody order has been enforced so that reunification can, and in the capable hands of my colleague here today, Dr. Steinberg, frequently does take place, then If the alienating parent carries on abusing their child after those 90 days, there should be the threat of civil or criminal sanctions to dissuade them. The child deserves to love both parents freely and without guilt. In 2016, I appeared in front of the board in the public forum and talked about the importance of educating therapists in parental alienation. In 2017, Dr. Steinberg and I appeared in front of the board on the agenda and made the same request. At the time, the board requested of themselves that research be done into what we asked. To the best of my knowledge, that research was never carried out. Prior appearing here today, I emailed you a package of research in the form of scientific peer-reviewed literature that not only goes to the heart of what we're asking for today, but also combats all the misinformation and disinformation you will hear in opposition. None of what those who disavow parental alienation tell you has been peer-reviewed and therefore cannot be replicated, the underpinnings of scientific research. Whereas we have hundreds of peer-reviewed articles, scientific papers, as well as bibliographies that prove categorically that parental alienation exists and that it is family violence. These papers are an eloquent, exhaustive, and authoritative testimony to the long-term physical and emotional damage parental alienation does to children. Today, Dr. Steinberg, Dr. Burnett, and I represent thousands of children across California, the United States, and the world who, through no fault of their own, have been unceremoniously torn from their parents' lives, sometimes for years, sometimes forever, knowing that their rejected parent might be living around the corner or on the other side of the world. It makes no difference. They're gone. And one day, they might understand that they were coerced into being complicit in the rejection of their own parent who always loved them. Ladies and gentlemen, nobody should have to live with that kind of guilt. It is time to put a stop to this insidious, malignant scourge. We, the members of the Parental Alienation Legislative Group, respectfully request that you finally support our effort to amend the Business and Professions Code without further delay by making it a requirement that all mental health practitioners working with children be educated in parental alienation. Now I would like to introduce my colleague, Dr. William Burnett. Thank you.